Hey everybody, and welcome back. In this video, I have something really exciting to show you, which is a new feature we have just released, which is our Faction MCP server. This is really going to unlock a lot of new capabilities into how you perform assessments. The MCP server will basically integrate into any tool that supports MCP functionality and configuration. So you can integrate it into OpenCode, you can integrate it into Claude Code, Copilot, LM Studio, Open Web, pretty much anything that supports MCP, you now have Faction capability inside of that. What this allows you to do is, say, for instance, you do a lot of pen testing with CLI tools. It'll allow you to integrate any CLI tool into Faction with a consistent and reliable reporting by using things like Skills.md files and Agents.md files, which all of these tools support. If you're more on the management side of things, you can now use natural language to get updates on how your assessment program is doing. Like, for instance, you could say, show me all completed assessments in the last 6 months that have critical findings, or show me all past due assessments, and it will just generate a report for you. And you can also combine this with things like skills and agents files to get a consistent, repeatable format for how you want to report on these things through the LLM and the MCP server. So with that said, instead of me just droning on about all the features, I think it's more important that I show you and let the demo speak for itself. So with that said, let's get started. All right, to begin using the Faction MCP server, you need 3 things. You need, 1, a version of Faction, whether it's our OWASP Faction or our enterprise version, up and running. You then need to download the MCP server from our GitHub, and then you need to configure it. And we'll be able to do this whole thing in just about a minute or so. I'm going to provide a link below in the description for how to get to the MCP server, but here it is. You can just go to Faction Security, Faction MCP, and click this code button and copy the link. Then you can clone it locally, and then we just need to configure it. On our GitHub, we have instructions on how to do that. So the first thing you need to do is copy the env file. This is where all of your API keys and settings are going to be. So let's copy that over, and let's see what's in here. Okay, so we need 2 things. We need our API key, and we need our instance of Faction. To get the API key, you're going to go to Faction, click on your profile, and the key is right here at the bottom. Since I'm running Faction locally, I just need to enter the IP address and port, so I'll add that here. It begins with HTTP or HTTPS, depending on how you have your instance of Faction configured. Mine is just locally on HTTP, and there. So that's half the setup. For this demo, I'm going to integrate this into OpenCode, which you can grab the configurations on our GitHub almost verbatim, but OpenCode uses a slightly different syntax, which we will demonstrate. So let's grab this. Let's go to our OpenCode config, which is, if you're on Mac or Linux, it's under .config OpenCode, opencode.json. I'm not exactly sure what it is on Windows, but I'm sure it's a pretty similar configuration. Now we have this open. You can see I have some MCP servers configured already. I have an Obsidian and Docker MCP. We just need to add this Faction one. So we just copy and paste that directly at the top. You can put it anywhere, but I'm just doing it at the top. And like I said, the syntax is slightly different for OpenCode. It doesn't use this args command. It just puts everything into the command parameter as an array. And okay, so that's mostly configured. It needs this type parameter added of local. And I'm not sure if it needs this, but I'm going to add it anyway just to make sure. I'm going to set it to enabled. All right. The next part is we need to tell it where our Docker Compose is. So that is going to be here. If we go to Faction MCP, I'm just going to do print working directory and copy this. And if I go back to this command, I can just paste that in here. Cool. All right. Now, if everything goes as expected, we should be able to run the OpenCode with our new MCP server. I'm going to open this in this Faction Skills folder, which will be apparent why I'm doing that in a minute. Now that it's opened, I should see 3 MCP servers configured, which I do. And then you can also do /MCPs and also see that each one is enabled. Perfect. Now we can do things like use natural language to ask Faction questions, like what are my current assessments? You'll see that it first went to Faction get queue, which is my assessment queue, and got the current assessments and broke it down by the ID, name, type, status, and the number of vulnerabilities. Pretty cool. Let's say I want to know, show me all closed assessments or completed assessments with critical findings. And in this instance, I've actually given Faction a skill on how to do this. And notice it's going for the Faction severity report skill. And it has very specific instructions on how it should call the APIs and how I want them reported. That's one of the coolest features about Skills and Agents.md files, which will go in depth a little bit more towards the end of this video. All right, so that's cool. Now, there's other cool things you can do with this. So now we have, say, I'm going to be working with assessment 420. That's my current assessment. So I want to say do an, basically I want to say do an in-map vulnerability scan and create a report of this and add it to my current assessment. I've also created a skill for this so that it always runs in-map in a particular order of operations and then takes the output and puts it in a specific table and severity and populates the descriptions and recommendations in the way that I would always want it reported. That way you can create that skill once and the LLMs will always report it into your pen testing reports exactly the way you expect. So let's see how that works. Let's say do an in-map vuln scan of druid.local, which is a server I have running in my lab that has some known vulnerabilities. Oh, I didn't specify the assessment, so it's asking me. So I'm going to say use 420. And yes, I have authorization. The LLMs don't always ask you this, but sometimes they want to make sure they're not doing something illegal, which I guess is good, but in this instance, it's kind of annoying. This scan can take a little while, so I'm just going to fast forward this part of the video. All right, now it is complete, and you can see the steps it went through. As I gave it in the skill, I told it to first do a quick port scan to identify open ports, and then I asked it to do a vulnerability scan on just those open ports, and then the skill also tells it how to report those issues and how to create the descriptions and recommendations. And after it's done, it says it's complete and actually created the vulnerability, as you can see here. If I go over to Faction now, I should see a new recommended finding. And in here, we have the details of the different vulnerabilities that were found at the different services that are running on this host. We have sort of a recommendation on how to mitigate these. And then we have this detailed summary of what we ran. So these are the commands we ran. These are the ports that were open. These are the weaknesses that were found. And then just sort of a summary of what the scan details were and what was detected. You can configure this however you want. This is just done through the Skills.md file that I have told the LLM how to run these steps. Okay, now the next thing I want to show is how you can integrate Faction into maybe other tools or other workflows that you have. I think it's probably pretty common to use something like Obsidian as a note-taking app to start jotting down findings really quickly as you're performing a pen test or security assessment. If you work this way and that's your workflow, you can use this MCP server to actually make that workflow a little more seamless into how you get your findings from that note-taking app into Faction. So as you noticed, I have an Obsidian MCP server installed, and over here I have my Obsidian Vault. Right now it's blank. What I've done is I've created a skill that tells the LLM how to integrate Faction with Obsidian and how to create a assessment structure and the way that I do reporting. So let's first do this. You can just say things like clone assessment 420 into my Obsidian Vault. And what this is going to do is it should first look for that skill, which it found, Faction Obsidian skill. And now it's going to start creating this assessment in Obsidian for me. If I go over here, you'll start to see it populate. I have this particular structure. It always gives the ID, the application ID, and then the application assessment name. And then it should create a vulnerabilities subfolder, which will include all the vulnerabilities. And there it goes. And it should start populating that nmap scan results that we already had. If you go to the main page, it actually pulls in your scope and everything from Faction. So you can just start here actually and always have your scope available with your credentials and URLs that you are using to perform this assessment. But let's say we have a new issue that we want to add. So in this case, I'm going to create a new note. I'm going to call this SQL injection. And I'm going to populate my steps and findings in here. The way I've done this is anything that has a details header will get added to the details. If there isn't any finding details or descriptions or recommendations, then it will leave those blank when it reports them. But we can do this. So this gives us our steps to reproduce. And just to illustrate what we can do with this, I'm going to go in and add my screenshots. So I'm just going to take a quick screenshot just of this. This is just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so let's say that's our screenshot of what the SQL injection was and proves that it was there. There we go. Now I'm going to go over to OpenCode and say I've added a new vulnerability. Please add it to Faction. Actually, I shouldn't have to tell it which assessment it is. It should remember. Okay, now it said it has completed this. Let's go into Faction and see what it looked like. So you can see I already have a new SQL injection issue. If I click on it, I didn't have any descriptions or recommendations, but I did have all these details here. And it even added the screenshot for me, which was really convenient and cool. I'm really excited about this feature. I think it's going to really save me a lot of time in my assessments and just really make things a little more fluid. All right, so with that said, but I do still need things like a description and recommendation here, right? So let's just see if it can do that for me. Let's just tell it to use the template first. Okay, so what I've done is Faction has a ton of templates. You can customize these. These are all your custom write-ups for common vulnerabilities and things like that. Things that are already peer-reviewed and the grammar's right and match the way you report out your findings. So we don't have to write that again every time. So let's just tell Faction to pull that in to this vulnerability and update it. All right, and you see it already just updated in real time in the background here. Yeah, so now we have our write-up, our description recommendation, all pretty much just done for us with very little work, just natural language, telling it what to do, and I think that is really powerful. The other thing is, if you go back to my Obsidian Vault, you'll notice it actually updated it. You can see that it actually synced this with what is in Faction. It updated the ID with what was created when we added the assessment. It updated the front matter, set the severities, added the CVSS string, and everything else. So we can then even just right here start making edits and then ask the LLM to sync it, and it'll keep everything in sync for us. The final thing I want to talk about quickly is how to use skills with Faction and LLMs to make sure your reporting is consistent and that the tools and everything do in a consistent manner what you want them to do. LLMs are non-deterministic unless you give them very specific instructions on how they want to do things, and even then they can sometimes come off the rails. It's important to give them a lot of context to make sure they do things consistently the way you would like. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to open up the skills files and agents files that I've created. So here you can see we have an agents.md file, and what this does is the agents.md file is usually read by anything like OpenCode or Claude Code or even Copilot to give the LLM context for what this session is about. I think that's to explain it very simply. In this case, we're telling, hey, here's skill routing, and you need to read this first. And we've told the LLM that these are the skills that it has and how to use them. And even some triggers like create an Obsidian, like if the user asks create an Obsidian vault for folder 420, this is the skill that it's going to use. Do not use these things. When doing an nmap scan, this is how you will be triggered to use this skill, and common things that the user might ask that sort of prompt the LLM to know when to use the skill. These are really important because if you don't add something like an agents.md file, it will not always use your skill. It will sometimes, but it's not always going to, and you'll get inconsistent results that will somewhat frustrate you. I highly recommend using an agents.md file. Now we have our skills files that we've created. So if you go to, this is OpenCode, so this is the format that they use. It's going to be .opencode skills. And then, like I said, we have a few that we've demonstrated here already. We have the severity report, which basically if I ask it to give me a certain number of records or things for certain dates, this is the flow that it's going to go through. It's going to tell it which APIs to call, which MCP function to call, how it should report severities, things like that. So it's very consistent and will always do it exactly the same way I wouldn't say exactly the same way, but it'll do it mostly the same way every time. You'll always get the same result, which is important. And if I look at the Obsidian Vault, this tells it, it had to be instructed to do things like if it's creating file names, because the way Obsidian works, the name of the file, which is also the title that shows up, can have things like special characters. Like you might create a vulnerability title that has like forward slashes and things like that in it. If those get created in an Obsidian Vault, those will get interpreted as new folders. And we don't want to do that. So this skill basically tells it to replace those with dashes so that it always creates the file names consistently. And there's also instructions here on how to handle images, screenshots, things like that, how to update the front matter, a lot of steps here. These skills might look overwhelming at first, but to be honest, I didn't write any of this by hand. I told the LLM exactly what I wanted, and it wrote the skill for me. Every time it was wrong, I updated it and said, this is not what I wanted it to do. Like, for instance, never do this. And then after a few iterations, it was able to create this so that it works for the way I wanted to report. So, and let's look at the nmap scan. The nmap scan skill, what I told it to do is do the steps it should produce are first do a quick port scan, then do a vulnerability scan based on those ports, which, as we showed in the demo, it did that skill exactly that way. And I have run this skill 100 times, and it has always done it in that order, the exact same way. I hope you get an idea of how powerful these skills can be. These, not just with Faction, but with any kind of pen testing. You can use these tools with your normal pen testing CLI tools to get more consistent, more enriched results that you can then use within your own assessments. These are all really powerful. And if you haven't played with anything like OpenCode or Claude Code for doing pen testing, I highly recommend giving it a try and see what you come up with. That pretty much covers everything I wanted to share with you guys today. I really hope this gives you some ideas on how you can use LLMs with Faction to make your own pen testing more efficient. And even if you're not using Faction and you're just getting started with LLMs for penetration testing, I hope some of this information about how to use OpenCode with like Skills.md files and Agents.md files can give you some ideas on how to automate some of your own internal processes, specifically those things where you have multi-command, multi-step processes that you have to run in every assessment. This gives you a way to just automate that and make your results more consistent and more accurate, and just make things more efficient. You don't have to worry about skipping a step. The LLM is going to go through it for you. And I think that is a really cool feature with this technology as it's evolving. And speaking of that, it's changing rapidly. I mean, what we had even 8 months to 12 months ago, I don't think anything I showed here today was really even possible. And who knows where we're going to be in the next 6 months. If you're using LLMs in your own pen testing, I'd love to hear about it. Please leave a comment below, because as I mentioned, it's changing so rapidly. We're all just trying to figure out how to use it, how to be efficient with it, figure out what makes sense, what actually helps in assessments, what gets in the way. We're only going to do that by sharing our knowledge with each other, and that just makes us all better pen testers. With that said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. I hope to see you again next time, but until then, farewell.